Nel nome del Padre, Figliolo, Spirito Santo. Amen.
Such a separation.
Very good. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here on this first Sunday in April 2023, Palm Sunday, as we said, the Sunday that celebrates Jesus' triumphant ride into Jerusalem, where the people waved palm fronds and laid them down, and they welcomed him like a hero. I'm not going to talk about Palm Sunday this week. I do want to thank also all the people who are now watching this on one of our many video platforms. My videos appear on YouTube and BitChute and Rumble. So whatever video platform you're watching this on, please subscribe. And actually, we reached a milestone this week. We got over 500 subscribers on YouTube, so that is great. And I also want to encourage people to join the healing team. If you're not already a member of the CMC healing team, please join the healing team or think about it and email me, and we will start a discussion about that. No obligation, just to start the discussion, but would love to give you more information about the healing team. And it's really a way to fulfill your divine function of the healing of God's holy child every single day with a dedicated group of people, and be a member of the Community Miracle Center. Okay, my talk for today, our part in the Celestial Speed Up. Okay, the Celestial Speed Up is a very interesting concept in A Course in Miracles. And if you only read the Foundation for Inner Peace book, you don't encounter the Celestial Speed Up. You have to be reading one of the earlier editions. And it's an interesting concept because it was mentioned, the Celestial Speed Up, in the movie The Story About A Course in Miracles, like 10 or 15 years before any of us saw it in print. So certain key people had access to these earlier editions of A Course in Miracles even before the general public did. And it attracted my attention when I first heard people talking about it, and I always wondered where it was, and I never could find it in the books. But then when the earlier editions came out, lo and behold, there it was. So it's mentioned 3 or 4 times, depending on which of the earlier versions you have. So here's one of the quotes, and this was in the reading that Reverend Elaine read. It said, "The chosen ones are merely those who choose right sooner. This is the real meaning of the Celestial Speed Up. Strong wills can do this now, and you will find rest for your souls." So we need to choose right sooner than maybe we would normally do it if we just let evolution play its course. We need to speed things up. We need to be strong-willed and do it now. There's reasons. We need to be part of the chosen ones, and the chosen ones are really the ones that choose right sooner. We can all be the chosen ones because we can all choose right. So why wait? Do it now. Course in Miracles says, "Be not content with future happiness. It has no meaning, and it is not your just reward, for you have cause for freedom now." So a lot of people still approach spirituality and healing like we're going to heal ourselves, so in the future we will be in a different state than we are in now. But A Course in Miracles wants us to break up all of that idea of future happiness and future healing. It wants us to choose it now. Speed up the process. Choose it now. There is no reason to wait. Don't be content with this idea that you're going to be happier in the future. Be happy now. Choose it now. The most kind of definitive statement of the celestial speed up isn't actually in A Course in Miracles proper. It's in what is usually referred to as Helen Schucman's unpublished autobiography. So Helen Schucman was writing all throughout her channeling and scribing and afterwards, and the intention was that she was going to write an autobiography. Well, the autobiography never got finished, but bits and pieces have been published in other works. Ken Wapnick published some of it in Absence from Felicity, and Robert Perry has published some of it in his complete edition, the Circle of Atonement edition. So the next thing I'm going to read is from Helen's unpublished autobiography. And you can read this passage in the Circle of Atonement edition. So remember, as I'm reading, I am speaking in Helen Schucman's voice, not the usual voice of Jesus that we usually think of when we read the Course, but this is Helen Schucman talking. And she said, because of the acute emergency, however, the usual slow evolutionary process was being bypassed in what might be called a celestial speed up. I could sense the urgency that lay behind this explanation. Whatever I might think about its content, the feeling was conveyed for me. The time was running out. So Helen had asked Jesus, why now? Why was she being called upon to do this scribing now? She didn't quite feel ready. And so what Jesus shared with her was that there was this celestial speed up that was going on. And she was asked to do her part to speed things up, that there was an acute emergency. You know, I talked about this just about 5 weeks ago in my talk, This Is Why We Are Here. It's the lead article in the current issue of Miracles Monthly. So there is, in my perception, an emergency going on in the world. You know, maybe there's an emergency always going on in the world, but I think a lot more people are way more aware of it than they have been in the past. And I've talked about this quite a bit. You know, faith in our institutions is at an all-time low. And even the institutions themselves talk about this. You know, faith in our government is at an all-time low. Faith in our health agencies is at an all-time low. We just are emerging from the COVID, whatever you want to call it, and all the mitigation strategies. You know, there was about a week or two ago, actually it was in January 30th, there was a very prestigious scientific journal called the Cochrane Review. And the Cochrane Review is considered by a lot of people to be the gold standard of medical journalism, and they reviewed, I believe, 78 different research studies. And what the Cochrane Review decided after reviewing these 78 different research studies was that, and I will quote, wearing masks in the community probably makes little or no difference on the outcome of laboratory-confirmed influenza SARS-CoV-2 compared to not wearing masks. So all that mask wearing really didn't accomplish anything. You know, a lot of the COVID strategies that we tried really didn't accomplish anything. All that sheltering in place had, you know, tremendous negative effects and didn't accomplish all that much. Now, the minute the Cochrane Review, which is usually considered the gold standard of this type of thing, came out with that declaration, you know, a lot of media jumped on it and tried to discredit it. So, you know, if you look it up, you will see, you know, different media outlets discrediting it. But up until that point, the Cochrane Review was considered to be the thing. You know, they've decided that all that masking up really didn't accomplish much. And I think a lot of people sort of realize that anyway. And so again, all our faith in our institutions and what they told us to do is at this all-time low. And, you know, our banking institution, the financial institutions, you know, we got a banking crisis going on. Banks are failing. And I've also noticed an interesting thing. I don't have any like actual data on this, but last week I went to the bank. It was the very first time in history that there were no teller windows open. And there were bank officials around, and I said, why can't I go up to the teller? And there was some excuse about why I couldn't go to the teller. And then afterwards I thought about it. I says, I wonder if they're preventing or trying to at least to slow down people taking their money out of the banks, because that's what causes the banking crisis. There's runs on the banks. And yesterday I was talking to Reverend Dusalthea, and she said, I went to the ATM to get some cash out, and I couldn't get any cash out of the ATM machine. And it didn't click in my mind immediately, but then I thought, oh, there it is again. You're making it a little more difficult to pull your cash out of the bank. You're trying to prevent or slow down people pulling their cash out of the bank, the runs on the bank. So there's a banking crisis. As I've talked about before, we had a huge spy balloon that floated all the way across the United States that had payloads the size of buses, 2 buses. And we didn't even shoot it down until it was over the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, it went all over the United States. And what the hell was that about? We had train derailments with these toxic spills. We had that terrible one, where was it, near Bethlehem? And it was an interesting report. The government officials they sent to clean up that toxic spill had to stop because they were all getting sick. And this was after they had declared that there was no problem with the air or the water, except everybody they sent to help clean up had to stop because they were getting sick. We got the war in Ukraine and Russia that keeps waging on and ramping up, and nuclear threats happening all the time. We got that massive U.S. debt of $32 trillion. We have this inflation and interest rates rising, and we have food costs rising. There are food shortages predicted, and maybe famines predicted, and we got healthy people just dropping dead all of a sudden adult death syndrome. We have this increase in all-cause mortality that's been going on, and the insurance companies, the insurance actuaries have been reporting this, trying to figure out, why are all these people dying that didn't used to die? And it's not because of COVID, and it seemed to have started in 2021. What started in 2021? We can't talk about that outright, because if we talk about that, YouTube will not let this video stay. So don't talk about it in the discussion. It's that thing that we can't talk about. Why are all these people dropping dead? We've got people restricting free speech. We got big tech and government colluding. There's been congressional hearings in the House of Representatives about the collusion of government and big tech, and how they restricted the speech of people. Robert Kennedy Jr., who many of you know, he's Robert Kennedy's son. He's the nephew of President John Kennedy. He's a very well-known environmental lawyer. He successfully sued Monsanto for their product Roundup, which he proved caused cancer, and he got a $290 million settlement out of Monsanto. And this was a huge thing. So, and he's had many lawsuits where he's a real environmental activist and a Democrat. And he last week announced that he's suing the Biden administration and various other government agencies for free speech violations, because he was kicked off these platforms for saying things that now have been proven true, but he was kicked off the platforms for saying them. And then it was found out that the government colluded with these big tech agencies to censor people on these platforms. So there's all kinds of things going. I also heard that Robert Kennedy Jr. is thinking about running for president. Wouldn't that be interesting? I hope he does. I think that would just really make the whole presidential campaign. Of course, he would be running as a Democrat. He's a Democrat, and he would be primary challenging President Biden. This is a really interesting thing. So there's all of this stuff going on, and I actually see it as part of the celestial speed up. There are things being exposed now. I think these things were always there. Maybe they're ramped up, but what I really think is happening is that we're all just becoming aware of them. They can't stay hidden anymore. And I think that's actually a product of our collective enlightenment. Our collective enlightenment is shining a light on all of these things that need to be corrected, that need to be healed, that need to be brought to the light. And this is indeed the celestial speed up. I think the celestial speed up is happening right now. As I said, I always really connected to this idea of the celestial speed up. And this week I was thinking about that a little bit. Why do I connect so much with this idea? And then I remembered this. I remembered the amazing movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. And what was that movie about? It was about a celestial speed up. It was about how otherworldly forces were interceding in the evolution of the world and of man and causing man to evolve into a higher order of being. It was a celestial speed up. I must have watched that movie 15 or 20 times. I absolutely loved 2001: A Space Odyssey. And it was about a celestial speed up. And I think that's what's going on in the world right now. Course in Miracles says if a sufficient number of people become truly miracle-minded quickly, the shortening process can be almost immeasurable. It is essential, however, that these individuals free themselves from fear sooner than would ordinarily be the case, because they must emerge from conflict if they are to bring peace to other minds. So a sufficient number, that's like a critical mass. A critical mass of people, when they get enlightened, are going to shorten time immeasurably. And I think it's happening. I think we are the critical mass. And we are the sufficient number. And we are shortening time, and the way that we're shortening time is bringing up clearly all these things that we really need to heal. It's a quickening. I love that word, quickening. It's a quickening that's happening in the world. And that's why the appearances that things seem to be getting worse. And as I said, no, they were really always terrible, but it's just that terrible can't hide anymore. It's been exposed. And we are challenged to really free ourselves from fear, to rid ourselves from fear, so we can bring peace into this time that so sorely will need it. The Course says the acceptance of the atonement by everyone is only a matter of time. Free will can temporize and is capable of enormous procrastination, but it cannot depart entirely from its creator, who set the limits on its ability to miscreate. So we can temporize. I looked that word up. It means avoid making a decision or committing oneself in order to gain time. So we can avoid making the decision, and I think a lot of the world has avoided making the decision. But for us spiritual people, for us A Course in Miracles people, especially for us who've been studying it and practicing it for a while, the time is up. The time is now. There is no reason to put salvation off in the future anymore. We need to do our part now. The world needs our part now. The world is ready for our part now, and we are ready to fulfill that part now. A lot is being asked of us because a lot is actually needed, because a lot is really healing right now. And actually, I'm tremendously hopeful. A couple of weeks ago, the House of Representatives and the Senate both agreed kind of unanimously that all the government documents about the origins of COVID had to be declassified because I don't know how much news you follow, because the Department of Energy and the FBI had finally declared that they believe COVID-19 originated from that lab in Wuhan, China. Now remember, if you had said that COVID-19 came from the lab in Wuhan, China 2 years ago, you would have been deplatformed. But now, that's really what's accepted as true. And now the people of the United States want to get to the bottom of it. Our legislatures want to get to the bottom of it. When do you know the legislatures to agree on something like that and have a bill go through the House and the Senate and go to President Biden's desk, and President Biden signed it? So I think by the middle of July, all the classified documents on the origin of COVID will be declassified, apparently, and the U.S. public can know what the government knows about those things. But not only that, this past week, the House of Representatives and the Senate both passed, again in a bipartisan effort, that the COVID emergency that has been declared and gone on for 3 years in the United States has to end. And Biden has said that he will sign that. And so the so-called emergency is going to end. So if you remember how the emergency started, first it was 15 days to stop the spread. And, here in San Francisco, we were told 21 days. And, I remember when that first happened, and I was pretty disturbed about that. And then they extended it a month. And then I was talking to our Reverend Vincent, who works with the Department of Public Health, and he looked at me and he goes, "It's not going to be a month. They're going to keep extending it. It's going to go on for a really long time." And that's when I started getting really a little concerned about it. And I remember giving a talk shortly after that an emergency has to be temporary by definition. If it extends on indefinitely, it's not an emergency anymore. It's the steady state. So we've had a so-called emergency going on here for 3 years, but it's going to be over. And by bipartisan agreement, when do we have bipartisan agreement? But by bipartisan agreement now, our elected officials have agreed that it's time for it to end. And I think that's just terrific. I mean, things like that give me a tremendous amount of hope and show me that the celestial speed up is actually happening. Democrats and Republicans actually can work together. That is amazing. Now, the thing to remember about the celestial speed up is we're speeding something up, but we're speeding something up that's ultimately going to happen regardless. In other words, it's not a question of the outcome. It's just a question of when. The Course says, "Sure of the ultimate interpretation of all things in time, no outcome already seen or yet to come can cause them fear." So there's no reason to really be afraid that this all isn't going to happen. It all will definitely happen. But our job is to make sure that it happens sooner, because the suffering isn't necessary. No one has to suffer. No one has to suffer anymore, because a miracle of healing is available to everyone. And that's the message that we, A Course in Miracles students, are here to bring to the world. And we need to demonstrate it to the world as well. Course says the basic decision of the miracle-minded is not to wait on time any longer than is necessary. Time can waste as well as be wasted. So that's our basic decision to make, is not to waste any more time. Because if we waste time, time wastes us. And we do not want to be wasted by time. I know that I do not want to be wasted by time. one more quote about the celestial speed up. This is again in the reading that Reverend Elaine read. The last judgment will extend over a similarly long period and perhaps an even longer one. Its length depends, however, on the effectiveness of the present speed up. How effective will this speed up be? And that's a question that we all need to ask ourselves. We're here to make it totally effective. We're here to do our part. We're the strong-willed. We're the chosen ones. We're choosing. We're choosing to bring healing and enlightenment to the world. And the time is now, because the speed up is happening now. And we're all needed. And you are needed, and I am needed, and join with us here at Community Miracle Center to reinforce that dedication. I was listening to an interview with Robert Kennedy Jr. A week or two ago, who, by the way, is considering running for president. That's a pretty amazing thing. And the interviewer was asking him, don't you get disillusioned? Now, remember, this is the guy who sued Monsanto and now suing the Biden administration. And he goes, no, I don't get disillusioned, or I don't get disturbed. He goes, because I've totally let go of a desire for any particular outcome. He goes, I just get up every morning and say to God, reporting for duty. And I just do the next thing that God tells me to do. And that's all that we have to do too. And I found that incredibly inspiring. Reporting for duty. Let's report for duty. Be the strong-willed. Find rest unto your soul. Do your part in the celestial speed up. That's my talk for today. Thank you very much.
Nel nome del Padre, Figliolo, Spirito Santo. Amen.
Such a separation.
Have you been lonely? Have you been sad?